Good afternoon. My name is Aisha Chugtai, and I'm the chair of the Budget Committee. I'm going to call to order our regular meeting for Monday, December 2nd, 2024. Before we begin the meeting, I want to offer a friendly reminder to all members, staff, and the public that these meetings are broadcast live to enable greater public participation. These broadcasts include real-time captioning as a further method to increase the accessibility of our proceedings to the community. Therefore, all speakers need to be mindful of the rate of their speech so that our captioners can fully capture and transcribe all comments for the broadcast. We ask all speakers to be mindful of the rate of their speech and clarity of their comments. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll so we can verify the presence of a quorum.
Councilmember Payne.
Present.
Wansley.
Present.
Rainville.
Present.
Vitaw.
Present.
Ellison.
Here.
Osman.
Present.
Cashman.
Present.
Jenkins is absent. Chavez.
Present.
Chowdhury.
Present.
Palmisano.
Present.
Vice Chair Koski.
Present.
Chair Chugtai.
Present.
We have 12 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. I will also remind my colleagues that we will be using speaker management today, so please make sure you sign in. We have one item on our consent agenda today and 3 items on our discussion agenda. We will start with the approval of the item on consent. This is a technical correction, amending language to complete the revenue transfer from American Rescue Plan Act funds to the general fund for the revenue replacement project. Is there any discussion or are there questions from the committee related to this item? I am not seeing any, so with that, I will move approval of this item. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The ayes have it, and that motion carries. Next up is item number 2, which is related to appointed, non-represented, and politically appointed employee salary schedules for 2025. This item was originally heard at our last regular committee meeting, but was referred back to us by the City Council. I've asked Brenda Miller from the Human Resources Department to give us another presentation, considering that her first presentation was given to us in a bit of a rush state at the end of a very long meeting following our incredibly well-attended second public hearing on the budget. With that, I will invite Ms. Miller to join us and begin her presentation. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Chugtai. And members of the committee, I'm here to request a 4% increase to the appointed, non-represented, and politically appointed salary schedules for 2025. This 4% increase, like I said, would go to the appointed, non-represented, and politically appointed. It would cost approximately $2.7 million and would cover about 653 employees. It would be effective the pay period beginning December 29th of 2024. And the increases support internal equity and are consistent with recently adopted labor agreements, and it's also consistent with external equity with projected labor market movement in 2025. It's also in the 2025 budget. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation, Ms. Miller. Are there any questions or discussion from committee members? I will first recognize Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you, Chair Chugtai. Can you please explain the difference between appointed and politically appointed employees?
Sure. The politically appointed employees are the ones that report to the council and to the mayor. So they're politically appointed. The appointed are those typically directors who serve at the discretion of the mayor in various departments. Some are issued through, or some are identified through the council charter. Others are just jobs that we determine meet the criteria of Section 201010 of the city charter.
Okay, thank you. So an appointed position is any that's, selected by the mayor or the council instead of going through a regular hiring process?
They can be appointed by the mayor, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Next, I will recognize Councilmember Chowdhury.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation.
For the appointed employees, so that, just to clarify, that's looking like for this specifically, is it leadership of departments?
Yes. Generally, there are some folks that are below leadership levels that are appointed.
Okay.
All of those have come to council in the past to be approved as meeting that section 201010 of the city charter.
And it's good to know it's also other folks that might not be like the director of the department, but is this inclusive of all the directors of departments or it's not in total?
No, all director level employees would be included in this.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. I am not seeing any further questions or discussion items. I am actually going to move approval of. I want to split up the question here. So 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3 being taken up separately. So I will start with item 2.1, which is approving an increase to the salary and wage schedule by 4% for the appointed employee group as discussed here today. That includes all director level positions along with most deputy director level positions across the enterprise, and this increase accounts for about $1 million. So starting with that, I will move to actually deny this increase, and happy to have further discussion, or we can have the clerks call the roll. I will recognize Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the motion to deny this, what would happen with the $1 million appropriated in the budget for it?
That $1 million is currently a part of the current service level calculations for 2025, so it wouldn't be used for that purpose. Would fall to the bottom line.
Okay, thanks.
I will next recognize Councilmember Chowdhury.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that we're taking this item back up as a body, and just wanted to note, wanted to note that, yeah, what we're discussing is, saving an additional $1 million. I personally feel like it's prudent for us to consider this amid budget constraints, and I think it's also important for the public to understand why we're having this discussion about denial for these higher level positions and a raise. I think an additional $1 million potentially falling to the budget, general budget line, or us considering it as a part of our discussion for levy reduction is prudent. I know we're going to have many discussions together as a body as we go through this budget cycle, and so that's how I'm personally wrapping my head around this item, and am supportive of denial at this time. I understand that our directors and deputy directors and city staff at large work very hard within our city, and at the same time, this is already salary positions that are highly competitive, highly well paid, and if in this moment where we're facing a deficit, where unfortunately we're going into a period of austerity budgeting or contemplating it, and me personally, I don't want to go in a direction of layoffs. I think this is a prudent way for us to discuss some savings and bringing back dollars to residents within our city.
Thank you. Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and sorry that my questions are so disparate. The next question that I wanted to ask, and it's actually for you, I believe, is what is the average salary of this group, if you know, or if there's a range?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know what the average salary is. The range can go anywhere from, say, $90,000 up to, I believe, as high as $300,000.
Okay. I'll just, kind of echo Councilmember Chowdhury's comments here that as we're approaching the budget right now and we're all looking for places to cut, I know many of us do have budget cuts that try to get $1 million here, $1 million there, and I do think that if we're looking at a 4% raise for some of the highest paid employees, that would be a good place to look for a cut. So I'll also support this motion to deny on that item today.
Thank you. And then I'll just provide some context that the highest paid position is about $390,000. Next, I will recognize Councilmember Rainville,
Thank you. Who makes $390,000?
the Commissioner of Community Safety.
Well, thank you for that. I do agree that we have to look at our budget. In fact, I have some amendments that call for reduction, but I think we should be more, to me, this seems vindictive and that we're focusing on these people. And I don't like that message at all. So I do look forward to continuing discussions about how we reduce the budget, but to single out one group and bear that, I think is bad policy. So I will not be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Chowdhury.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure that my intent is clear. I'll just respectfully disagree with my colleague on personalities comment on vindictiveness. I think when we're sitting up here and when I'm sitting up here, I'm looking at this as we have a budget, we have to think about how we're going to find savings, and this is a way to ensure savings are made while we're keeping our workforce intact. We're making sure that our leadership and city staff maintains the salary that they are receiving. I think this is a moment where we're all going to have to make some tough decisions. This is one of them, but I have nothing but respect for our city staff that carries out the duties of our city every single day. I know that they're trying to do the most that they can with the limited resources that they see forthcoming come to 2025. I know that they asked in early budget conversations for many things to be within their department, and some of them were able to come through in the mayor's proposed budget, and then we'll take up discussion and do markup on our own. So I just wanted to note that, and I also want to note just the difficult nature of this conversation. There's a lot that we're balancing here in having this conversation.
Thank you. Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Vito.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question about the process. You said that you were moving to, how did you phrased it differently? We weren't just going to vote on it the regular way. You said it different.
I moved to deny.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm not seeing any further discussion. So with that, I will ask the clerk to call the roll on item 2.1, which is 4% salary increases for appointed officials.
That's for denial.
Yes, which is denying 4% salary increases for appointed officials.
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley.
Aye.
Rainville.
No.
Vita.
No.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Cashman.
Aye.
Jenkins is absent. Chavez.
Aye.
Chowdhury.
Aye.
Palmisano.
No.
Vice Chair Koski.
Nay.
Chair Chugtai.
Aye.
There are 8 ayes and 4 nays.
Thank you. Next, I will move to approve item 2.2, which is a 4% increase for the politically appointed employee group. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley.
Aye.
Rainville.
Aye.
Vita.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Cashman.
Aye.
Jenkins is absent. Chavez.
Aye.
Chowdhury.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Vice Chair Koski.
Aye.
Chair Chugtai.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes and 1 absent.
Thank you. Next, we will move to item number 3, which is 4% increases for all classified jobs in the non-represented employee group. I will move approval of this item and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley.
Aye.
Rainville.
Aye.
Vita.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Cashman.
Aye.
Jenkins is absent. Chavez.
Aye.
Chowdhury.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Vice Chair Koski.
Aye.
Chair Chugtai.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes and 1 absent.
Thank you. Next up, so item number 2.1 has been denied. That motion carried. Item number 2.2 and 2.3 have both been approved, and that motion carries. Those motions carry. Next up, we have item number 3, and that is the appointed position in the Office of Community Safety of Deputy Commissioner of Community Safety. For that, I will now re-invite Brenda Miller from the Human Resources Department to give that presentation. Welcome. Clerks, if we can make sure Ms. Miller's microphone is on. Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm here to present the Deputy Commissioner of Community Safety for your approval. The Deputy Commissioner of Community Safety is part of the Office of Community Safety and will lead various Office of Community Safety departments to provide equitable, ethical, and effective service delivery to the city while providing guidance and strategic work direction to assigned areas of responsibility. The Deputy Commissioner of Community Safety has been evaluated at 830 points, grade 18. The 2024 schedule ranges from 182 to 215,000. This position will not be filled until 2025. The 2025 costs for this position are funded by converting 2 MPD vacancies to this position and MPD discretionary funding. The changes would be effective December 5th of 2024. This position meets the criteria of Section 201010 of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances. It reports to the Commissioner of Community Safety. It's a member of the Office of Community Safety's executive management team. It develops and implements city policies, goals, and strategic planning for the Office of Community Safety. It requires leadership, team building, and strategy implementation, and establishes policy goals and strategies that are consistent with the goals and priorities established by the mayor, city council, and the Commissioner of Community Safety. Our request is that you find that the Deputy Commissioner of Community Safety meets the appointed criteria as defined in Section 201010 of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances and forwarded on to council for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. I will now invite Commissioner of Community Safety, Todd Barnett, to speak to this position.
Good
Welcome,
afternoon.
Commissioner.
Good afternoon. Also, members, of course, I'm Todd Barnett, Commissioner of Community Safety, and I just wanted to make a couple of comments about this position, Deputy Commissioner within the Office of Community Safety. This position is crucial at this time because of what I believe is our shared goals to have compliance beyond the settlement agreement and hopefully the consent decree that we'll get, and also the implementation of the Safe and Thriving Community Report. And as you know, that's a 10-year plan. I think part of explaining this is that we have all of these requirements and conditions for the settlement agreement that we currently have. And people focus in on MPD and all of that work that goes on there. But when you look at what's being asked by ALIFA and what we need to do, a lot of the alternatives to the response of police lie in a lot of the work that will come out of the Safe and Thriving Community Report. And why do I say that? Because people, I think, look at MPD as separate. They are part of our community safety ecosystem, and part of that system They play a critical role, there's no doubt there, but they're just a part of that system. And as we're moving forward and looking at alternatives and being innovative and also being accountable to what we're doing and trying to use data and other things, they are interconnected. And so given the scope and the size of this work needed to accomplish the goals for community safety, a deputy commissioner is crucial and essential to ensuring a consistent, thoughtful, and intentional planning, not just across the 5 community safety departments, but across the whole enterprise. Not just like a lot of people think of community safety in the 5 departments, but when we're trying to move this work, we have to move it as an enterprise. And so we're constantly in contact with departments like IT or 311 or the city attorney's office in order to get this work done. There's no doubt that the deputy commissioner would be a primary driver in the executive oversight and implementation and compliance of the settlement agreement, but this person also provides executive leadership in coordination as we look at those priorities that are relative to the Safe and Thriving Community Report. We see a lot of that in the work that Director Amanda Harrington does with our safety centers, with other things that we're trying to accomplish. This position, of course, does not currently exist, although it is provided in the charter. Right now, a lot of the duties of what the deputy commissioner would take on lie between myself and my chief of staff, of course. So, for instance, right now, the chief of staff is involved in a lot of the work around the settlement agreement, but he's also in the DOJ negotiations. And those are not the role for the chief of staff. That's a role for the deputy commissioner or myself. But we're just spread thin in what we need to accomplish in our sort of day-to-day operations and just as we move along in implementing all the things that we have to do for community safety. When you look at the deputy commissioner's role, I really look at it in about 3 areas, and that is, one, when you look at that operational leadership, the chief of staff is really that day-to-day leadership with the immediate staff, where the deputy really oversees the operations and how things are connected overall. Of course, the deputy commissioner would substitute for me in places where I'm not available, but also this person coordinates the departments in getting things done and making sure that we're aligned. Whereas the chief of staff is more in communications, making things are going well there, where that deputy is really in controlling how we're moving as an enterprise to accomplish our goals. So I'll end with just that the immediate need right now is the work that's being done on the Safe and Thriving Community Report, and also the need to really address the heavy lifting involved with compliance beyond the settlement agreement. Thanks. I'll stand for questions if there are any.
Thank you for your presentation. Colleagues, are there any questions related to this proposed appointed position? I will first recognize Councilmember Wansley, followed by Councilmember Cashman.
Yes.
Thank you, Council Vice President Chuck Tai. I just had a couple of questions and comments. On the slide, it mentions that the presentation is being filled by 2 MPD positions. Can you clarify which specific roles within MPD is this being funded through or sourced through?
Chair Chuck Tai, Councilmember Wansley, I have my Director of Administration to answer that question way more succinctly than I could, so I'll ever do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Chugtai, Councilmember Wansley. The 2 vacant positions are an Office Support Specialist 2 and a Project Manager.
That is good to know because we have budget coming out, and I believe those are two budget items that I'm also looking at. So would be good to touch base on that piece, and yeah. With that too, also, can you share, this might be a little bit more for the commissioner in terms of just like a percentage breakdown of, time you spend right now pertaining to the settlement agreement and that this new deputy commissioner will also spend, just trying to get a sense of like offloading the workload for you and what you're spending now and how this person will take that up.
Yes, Chair Chuck Tag, Councilmember Wansley, and Director of Administration was Murray Anderson. While percentage-wise, that varies, Councilmember Wansley. And right now, if I could explain it this way, when the State Human Rights Department went into negotiation, a lot of the heavy lifting for that was with the city attorney's office. So that work, if you can think of it, when that settlement agreement was finalized, that work started really then in MPD starting to ramp up. And I think you saw that the last couple of budget cycles with the staff requests for that implementation unit and what have you. So as that has been going on, also what's shifting is now that we have an independent evaluator in ALIFA, we're now focusing a lot on the compliance of that settlement agreement. So where the lift started with the city attorney, now that workload is moving more under the Office of Community Safety. And what you would have seen previously is MPD working like this, and I'm going to say sort of like a silo, although there were other departments. But now what's needing to happen, because being able to implement this work involves so many other departments, is that sort of cross-department work, and how do we move in a direction as a city instead of NPD just moving separately. So I say all that to say that if I had to guess a percentage that I'm spending, I would say probably right now 30% of my work is probably somehow connected to the settlement agreement itself, and that's slowly ramping up. Right now, I think a lot of the last couple of weeks have been really focused on the possible consent decree.
And with the DOJ, because my understanding is also the DOJ's provisions will wrap into the MDHR settlement agreement, so we wouldn't have two separate consent decrees. Do we foresee, again, those compliance provisions kind of wrapping up where you would be having increasing responsibilities, and then this deputy also would be having increasing responsibilities? And I'm trying to figure out how does that pair then with Director Harrington's, because you also mentioned the alternative response, and from my understanding, like Director Harrington is moving a bulk of that work largely a lot by herself. So interested of how a director at that level support her.
Yes. Chair Chuck Tai, Councilmember Wansley, just to go back, there will still be two different agreements, if we can call them that. We'll call the state one the settlement agreement, but there will be a separate consent decree from the federal government. Yes, there are provisions within the settlement agreement that defers to the possible consent decree. That's very true. The idea, of course, is to have one independent evaluator. I think you can probably expect that the federal government have other things that they look at that were separate from the state Human Rights Department. So there'll probably be other things in addition to the settlement agreement that need to take place. We just don't know yet because that hasn't been finalized. But we will have two agreements, one with the state and one with the federal government, that we'll have to comply with. Getting to Director Amanda Harrington, what I will say there is, and I think she'll agree with me, she's done amazing work with the limited staff she has in what she does. And if you can think of her as her own department almost, this person, this deputy commissioner, could really help in that work. How do we move the enterprise in this direction? Because both of these things intersect with each other, and having that type of executive oversight and support, I think, would be helpful. Because it's really getting to the priorities of what is needed to have that breadth of knowledge.
And that's where I'm a little also confused, because
Yes.
from my understanding, Director Harrington comes to PHS pretty frequently. She keeps us, in the loop, does a very good job on that. And she's reporting to us, she has implementation teams amongst the enterprise where they are representing, staff, again, all across the enterprise, of how they're moving the work forward around the Safe and Thriving Communities report and plan, how they're moving that work forward. So this idea that she is orchestrating this staff buy-in and also doing so while getting other external agencies bought in. So I will name,
Yep.
and I'll just segue to my comments then of where I'm struggling with this position. And this is kind of tied to our earlier discussion around the previous positions, but just the purpose of these deputy positions under the new government structure, and how this is translating to also the underlying theme around how they're getting at increasing higher level of basically service to our residents, and the key piece of just public safety services, because that's essentially what you all are charged with, and that's what the consent decrees are being charged with, of how we're providing ethical, non-racist, armed safety services, but also Safe and Thriving is how do we streamline and provide quality unarmed safety services and pair those together, and under this new umbrella of the Office of Community Safety. And it's been a challenge to really evaluate how these deputy director positions really help to streamline that, and if they're just adding another layer of unnecessary bureaucracy. And we haven't done a really good job of integrating just ongoing evaluation of whether or not they are helping or essentially doing that piece. And I will name, we all know our residents care about public safety, that's a top priority. And I think, I would rather like to see us prioritize us making those programmatic investments. In fact, our last PHS meeting, we had that OCS quarterly update, and you all provided thorough, information on basically what you accomplished this year thus far, and then your tentative goals going into 2025 in the OCS work plan section. A lot of it was, again, Director Harrington's lion's share of work of just the great things she's been doing with the, collaboration she's doing with council members like Councilmember Chavez or Council President Payne with the Lake Street Safety Center or the Safety Ambassador programs, working with us in spite of opposition initially from the mayor to roll out these critical safety programs. And it's been great to be able to have that. And as you mentioned, it's just one of her. And it would be great to, instead of have another director, which she is a director, why wouldn't we just repurpose that position to support multiple of her? And that was even reinforced by the NYU report, where they're saying you actually do need to reinforce your expansion of unarmed safety services. That's literally spelled out in the Safe and Thriving Communities report. You have the capabilities to divert almost 50% of 911 calls away from MPD. And this could actually tackle some of the staffing challenges that you all are talking about as it pertains to MPD and overall in your public safety system. So, and Director Harrington is literally taking that on face value. So as we're talking about this conversation of prioritization, I'm really struggling to see in this current time how this position fits in with that particular need, like as organizationally, when we could literally be providing a $200-something thousand like position, maybe to provide two, maybe FTEs directly under her division right now. So I would say I can't support this position based off of that, that kind of current dynamic right now. But that is no to say, like, I get what you're presenting, but it doesn't make sense right now, considering like where our residents have made it clear they want to see more public safety services. She's delivering that division that you've all set up. Yep. And her amazing leadership, they are delivering that. And I would love to see that infrastructure be invested in. And if we have resources like this available right now, I would love to be reprioritized, and you as the leader of this office to be able to make those decisions, to be able to move those resources where it's being very clearly like where it's being most effectively used. So I'll just name that, and why I won't be supporting this position today.
Chair Chuck, can I make one comment?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Councilmember Wansley, I think we do agree about how amazing Director Harrington is, but she can't keep up this pace. I mean, her pace is unbelievable right now. And so being able to take some of this load off just across this division would be helpful. I don't know. I mean, I haven't worked in any other division to talk about how they use their folks. I think each time that I've come here and talked about a specific position in the Office of Community Safety, I've really tried not to rush and fill positions. I think I've been thoughtful and intentional about trying to analyze what that position should be used for, or trying to reclassify a position. Like I reclassified a position to have a director of administration, was lucky to get who you saw here, Director Marion Anderson, to be able to help. The touch points that Director Harrington is making comes with a cost, with the speed at which we want to get this work done. And so, as I look at these two huge things for the city that's under community safety, and I think of the speed in which this council, ALIFA, the residents want things to happen, I do just think that this position is critical to moving this work at a pace, one that's reasonable, but also at the pace that I think is being expected. So thank you.
I'm sorry, Council Vice President, can I just offer a quick comment on that? Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm looking at the org chart that you presented with the budget, and I'm looking under the, as you mentioned, division that Director Harrington leads, design and implementation, and she has one senior project manager and a data analyst. So actually, you and I are not saying very different things. What I'm saying is I would love to have seen, instead of another upper level manager position that we're being asked to approve, why not another 2 senior program managers under this division for this, the repurposing of this position for that, to make investments in this particular division, as you just named, is doing incredible work. And the lion's share of that work is being driven by one individual who this is not sustainable. Yep. We see Director Harrington, I get emails from her at 9 p.m. That's crazy. No worker should be sending emails at 9 p.m., but I know she's that dedicated and committed to that work, to keeping us updated, and making it clear that she is committed to making sure that this work is being seen through. And I would love to have seen this position be reclassified for her to have gotten 2 additional FTEs for that. So actually, I don't think we're saying anything different. I just wish I would not be approving this particular position and seeing 2 FTEs instead for that division.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I will recognize Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe my question is for Ms. Miller. I was just wondering how many deputy commissioner positions there are in the city, and how that position is very different from like an interagency coordinator, like the positions we see in reg services and CPED and public works.
That's a very good question, or a couple of questions, and I don't have the answers for you today, but I'd be happy to get back to you on that.
Okay, and then maybe this is for Commissioner Barnett, is why did you seek a deputy commissioner versus an interagency coordinator? I've been on the council for almost a year now, but since the very beginning of the year, my question for you has often been like, why isn't there an interagency coordinator in the Office of Community Safety? Because in CPED and in Reg Services and Public Works, that's our go-to person that does what Amanda Harrington does with like the updates to council or liaising between 311 and council and other departments. And you mentioned that as something that the deputy commissioner would do. So how did you make that decision?
Chair Chuck Ty, Councilmember Cashman, when I took on this role, I looked at what positions we had in the Office of Community Safety. And so when you look, I could be wrong, I think it's like 12.10 in the ordinance, it calls for a deputy within the Office of Community Safety. So each of these roles within the office I've tried to fill. The reason why I think this position specifically is important, going back to some of my comments earlier, is just that the lifting of the work that needs to be done across the departments. And I said that earlier, and I would add to it, is just not within the city of Minneapolis, but we're having these partnerships with Hennepin County, trying to have partnerships with the state. This position is crucial to doing that work at the speed that is expected of us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks for that answer.
Yep.
I would like to have a follow-up on the amount of deputy commissioners versus amount of interagency coordinators and just what the difference is between those roles or the expected differences between those roles. And thank you, Commissioner, for outlining that it's more than just coordination within the enterprise, but like with other governmental partners as well, that you see this role playing as well.
Thank you. And next I will recognize Councilmember Rainville, followed by Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you. I will be voting for this, and I'd like my colleagues to think through how we get to this higher level of non-armed public safety, and we get through that by having the staff to carry it out. So with the settlement agreement and the soon-to-come consent decree, because I get up every morning being optimistic, and I think we're going to get that done before the new regime takes over at the federal government. So we will have one. We need someone to carry that through. And we really need help with our public safety from the county and state, and we're not getting that help right now. We need someone that is responsible and can be held accountable, and that's what I see this position as, especially when we get into the solving the problem of homelessness. We need that help from the county and the state to help keep everybody safe, those in the campus and those as neighbors. So I really ask you to think long and hard about how successful this position would be and to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you. And next I'll recognize Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. From this conversation, I come in open-minded to this conversation. I'll just say it sounds like we are doing this work, but it's coming at the cost of doing more integrated work. It's coming at the cost of doing more safe and thriving communities integration. It also sounds to me like having the commissioner work so much on settlement agreement stuff means less attention to the Safe and Thriving Communities report, less attention to other departments. I get that our Office of Community Safety is, and is still fairly nascent in its development. It's a bit of a bare bones operation. So if we are serious about compliance with the settlement agreement and integrating it with the Safe and Thriving Communities report, we need qualified people working on it full-time. Not saying the commissioner isn't qualified, just saying he's pulled in a whole lot of different directions. So those are my thoughts about it. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm not seeing anyone else in queue, so with that, I will move approval of this item. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it, and that motion carries.
Could I ask for a roll call vote, please?
Yeah, clerks, will you call the roll, please?
Is that unclear? Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley.
Nay.
Rainville.
Aye.
Vitaw.
Aye.
Ellison.
No.
Osman.
Aye.
Cashman.
Aye.
Jenkins. Is absent. Chavez.
Aye.
Chowdhury.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Vice Chair Koski.
Aye.
Chair Chugtai.
Aye.
There are 10 ayes and 2 nays.
That motion carries. And our next and final item is a report on the third quarter 2024 financial status reports on select city funds. We have finance staff on hand to give this presentation, so I will welcome our city controller, George Hardgrove, to begin that presentation. Welcome.
Thanks.
Take your time.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Chugtai, Vice Chair Koski, council members. My name is George Hardgrove, the controller for the city of Minneapolis. And so I'm coming today to talk about the third quarter financial report. Before I begin, I just wanted to acknowledge the hard work of the staff in the controllers division, particularly Randy Hagar and Ra Choth, and all the managers and all the people that worked on this and worked on the forecast and everything as well, too. So anyway, I want to appreciate that. There you go.
Next slide.
Yeah, you got it?
Yep.
Okay, you can go to the next slide then. Okay, thank you. As we get our technology in order here. I just wanted to mention on this slide here that this forecast is a point of time as of September 30th. We haven't done our audit yet. We're working on that for year end. Like any point in time forecast, circumstances change, from that time, and so just wanted to just wanted to mention that new things can come up, and so this is really as the way things were as of September 30th. So anyway, moving on to our highlights here. I'm happy to say that in September of 2024, Fitch and Standard & Poor's confirmed our AAA bond rating. So that remains the same. Another highlight that's a good thing is the parking revenues are rebounding. They I think do plan on working on some capital projects, a few things that were deferred as well too, because of the pandemic and the revenue hits that it took. Property taxes are down. We expect it to be under budget by about $21 million. The city's practice is to budget the property taxes at the very full amount that's assessed, but there's usually a delinquency factor, and so that's budgeted as an expense. So we do expect it to be under budget, but it's a little bit more under budget. However, the good news is the downtown assets where the local sales taxes are deposited in, they continue to do better and are recording higher revenue so far this year. So anyway, and then finally, the last to highlight really is the ARPA spending. There was a resolution that the council passed in November to wind it down by the end of this year. So we're busy, and I know the departments are busy, spending the remaining funds that got transferred to the general fund, and then we expect the funding in the ARPA fund to be closed out at the end of the year, and then we can do the final reports for the federal government. Next slide here. As far as our investments, as of September 30th, we have about $1,045,000 or so. That's a decrease of about $65 million from last year, and that's versus a book value of about $110 million. A book value, just to define that, that's the price that we bought the assets at, and then of course that's compared against the current, today's amounts, to calculate a gain or loss or unrealized gain or loss. The city, I'm happy to report the city's meeting fund balance, net position, and cash reserve minimums in all but very few funds. One of them is the self-insurance fund. That has quite a bit of cash, almost $165 million, but it has even more liabilities. So that we'll continue to assess our liabilities there as we move through the year-end process. Then there's a new area that's on here for the third quarter here, and that's the fleet services or equipment fund. They had some revenue reductions in the past. My understanding is there's many vehicles that were ordered. They typically have pretty long lead times since the pandemic, but they are starting to come in here now, and they're starting to pay for new vehicles or things that have been ordered for quite some time. So that's resulting in the cash starting to be depleted. We forecast a little over $1 million at the end of this year. So that's something certainly that we'll want to take a look at and come up with a plan, although I do think the department is working on it right now. Parking is still not at the target, but it is getting better, as I mentioned earlier. And so that's on the bright side. And then further good news is property services is now above the target, so that's going to go off this list. So one area added fleet, and then one area property services that came off the list this time around. Moving on to the general fund. The purpose of this fund is really to account for anything that basically doesn't belong in another fund or a more restricted fund. It's typically the most unrestricted funding that the city has, typically property tax and fees and things like that go in there. As far as the cash balance, at year end of last year was about $231 million, and now it's at about $148.3 million. It's increased from last time, from the second quarter, mainly I think because of the property tax receipts that were received this summer. As far as the general fund balance, we're projecting a ending balance of about a little less than $170 million. That's about $40.6 million less than what it was at the end of last year. It's gotten a little better since the second quarter report, in the sense that the expenditure forecast went down a little bit, and so that helped bump up the projections for the ending fund balance. This does exceed the 70% minimum, but it's not at the recommended percentage of 25%. So the minimum is about $113 million, which would be the 17%. So we're about $56 million above that. As you can see from the PowerPoint presentation, the 24 original budget included 18.2 million in fund balances. And then we've rolled over about another 25 million or so. So, that's one reason why the fund balance is going down, because of the rollovers, the planned use of fund balance plus the rollovers. Of the 169.8 million, about 27 million should probably be in the restricted class, mainly because it's public safety aid from last year and settlement agreements. And then based on the third quarter general fund projections, the unrestricted balance is at about 21.5% at the end of this year. So that helps maintain the city's AAA bond rating. And then moving on further, kind of in the graphical sense here, this slide here kind of shows the different areas, different types of revenue that come in. You can see almost half of it is property taxes. And then, of course, we have service charges, franchise fees, state aid transfers, other types of revenue too. If you look at the chart down below here, comparing to the second quarter when we did the forecast before, we're down about 7 million or so in property taxes and service charges. That's gotten a little worse, but fortunately it's been made up by about the same amount. The franchise fees and the licenses and permits are going up by about 7 million. So they kind of have offset each other. So we're still at the $36 million, $36.3 million under budget for revenue through 24. So that forecast really hasn't changed since the second quarter. A few areas are up, a few down. And then just looking at the timing of the revenue, you can see it's definitely backloaded in the fiscal year or the calendar year here at the city. You can see where steadily projects up, towards the second half of the year when the receipts are received, especially for property taxes. So we're planning on getting about a little less than 95% or so of the revenue, of the budgeted revenue, versus the average of the last 3 years is about 106%. So that just shows the forecast is, it kind of explains kind of why the forecast is down this year. Then moving on to the expenditure side, the expenses are trending a little bit lower than budget. You can see we're about at $40 million under for the general fund that I mentioned earlier. So that helped improve the forecast a little bit from the second quarter. As far as the specific departments down below, internal services, the internal service departments are, since the second quarter, their spending is projected to be up by about $1 million from what we projected back in June, as well as the public safety area as well too. So overall, since June, the spending is up by about $9 million, but we've also had a budget increase of about $10.5 million. So that makes makes it a little bit better. It helps a little bit on the fund balance projections. And then the next slide just kind of shows the timing of the expenditures. Again, we're projecting to be about $39.9 million under budget. You can see they're backloaded as well too. In December, we typically have kind of 2 months worth of expenditures, especially for like contract services, because we accrue things into the prior year when we get into January. You can see we're projecting them to be about 95% of budget or so, which is fairly similar to the last 3 years. So moving on to the other funds, the next category in our family of funds is the special revenue funds. And they're generally used to keep track of funds that are restricted, possibly through some other government agency or through council action. So this includes things like the convention center, the downtown assets. There's a small special revenue fund in the police department, regulatory services, the grant, and CPED has quite a few special revenue funds as well too. So first what I wanted to point out is in terms of the fund balance, it's a $15.2 million decrease, and that there may be a typo on your copy of the presentation here. There's something I spotted last Wednesday, and so I just wanted to apologize for that and just make sure it is a decrease from the end of the year in 2023 for the fund balance. So anyway, they've gone down a little bit, driven by the downtown assets and some from CPED as well too. The cash projected has also gone down quite a bit, by about 103 million from last year's year end. A lot of that is driven by ARPA as well too, since I think almost 80 million or so has been spent since the end of last year. And we talked about that earlier too, how our plan is to spend that down. So that's kind of the story behind the special revenue funds. The next slide, we just have, the specific numbers for each fund. You can see the convention center is, that's down a little bit from the second quarter when we came in June by about $5 million or so. Most of that is due to revenue, and then a $1 million increase in transfers to the general fund. The downtown assets fund is also down by about $5 million from when we were here in September, or I should say in the end of June, generally because of debt service spending. And then CPED is down as well too. So that's kind of the main changes on the special revenue funds. Then the internal service funds. These funds are what we call the proprietary funds, along with the enterprise funds. And so they operate like regular businesses, but they're dedicated to serving the internal operations of the city, the city's government and everything. So rather than selling their service to the outside, like water, they concentrate internally, like providing IT service. So you can see some of the major ones is fleet we've talked about, property services, stores, IT through the intergovernmental services, self-insurance funds. In this case, the net position is at $79.2 million, about a $10 million decrease from 2023, primarily because of fleet and the increased purchases of new equipment. Cash is down as cash has increased actually from 2023. That's driven by the self-insurance fund as well as property services, and in addition to IT as well too. So those departments kind of have led to an increase in the cash projected from compared to 2023 to 24. And then moving on, you can see specific amounts here in the internal services. You can see, like I say, fleet is down almost 10 million. That's entirely due to capital spending. Intergovernmental services, I think a lot of that is IT. That's risen by about 6 million since the second quarter, since we forecasted the second quarter. So that's gotten a little better, mainly because of decreased spending in the IT area as well too. Otherwise, things have remained pretty constant since June 30th. And then finally, on to our last group of funds. This is the enterprise funds. So these run like businesses, and they generally sell their services outside of the city to the residents. This can include utility operations like sanitary sewer, stormwater, water, solid waste, the parking fund. Net position is projected to increase by about 9.4 million from the 2023 year end. That's generally driven by the parking area and the water and sewer. Projected total cash at year end is about 93.7 million. That's a $7 million decrease, and that's generally caused by waste in the stormwater area. This is a fairly stable fund, but stormwater and the water are starting to draw down their balances for capital spending. And finally, the last slide kind of shows the specific areas. You can see the sanitary sewer has, since last time, since June 30th, has gone down a little bit by about $5 million, mainly due to increased expenditures. Stormwater's down by about $13 million. Revenue is down there about $25 million, but spending in capital has also decreased as well too. So that's caused the cash and the net position to go down for stormwater. And then finally for water, that's up about $10 million for the year so far. And last comment I'd want to make is I did attach the 3 reports that the council asked for last time, after the second quarter report. I don't have a presentation specifically on those reports, but I did attach those for your reference. So at this point in time, I'll stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Colleagues, are there any questions related to the third quarter financial status report? I'll first recognize Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you. Thank you for the very thorough report. I just have a couple questions. So when you talk about the 21 million in property tax, I believe you call it non-collectible amount?
Delinquent, yeah.
Delinquent.
Yeah, delinquencies, yeah.
Do we have any idea of, as these buildings get sold in downtown for less, they take us to tax court on their assessed value and that gets lower? How do we account for that, or do we have any knowledge of what's coming down the pipeline on that?
I can answer the first part of the question. Yeah, that would, when the tax court rules, to lower someone's taxes, then that fits into that. We call it delinquent, but it's not. I guess you could call it delinquent and otherwise, reduced. As far as the downtown area, I'd have to defer on that. I can talk to our property tax people and get a better idea of, especially the assessor's office. I think that could help us with specifically the downtown area. So
Yeah, and that would be great. I don't mind waiting for that. I'm just wondering if we could make that official, Madam Chair, that I could get a follow-up on that.
Clerks, if we can note that for administrative follow-up. Would you like to have the council member repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
The question is, how is the decline in office values affecting our future property tax revenue coming in? And then the second question I have is, you had mentioned the parking fund was doing well. What do you mean by doing well? There wasn't a stat on that. Is it 5 million over? Is it 2 million over?
Here, let me,
I might have missed it.
Okay, let me turn to that. I can get some more detailed information here. Okay, so I'm looking at the detailed report. So this is like this kind of the 60-page report that was attached to this. At year end on the revenue side, which is generally they account for like off-street parking, on-street meters, towing, things like that. It's gone from about 67 million or so in 2023 now up to about 70.5. So that's about $3 million more in revenue. Then the use of funds, the debt service is down about $4 million or so this year. The rest of the transfers out to the general fund are down as well too. So overall, the expenses are a little bit down from last year as well, but the revenue is going up. So that's kind of helping it, get back to the target which they expect to reach next year.
That's great, thank you. So if everything is looking good, if we're paying the expenditures, the bills is down, the revenue is up, how come there's less money going into the general fund?
I'd have to get back to you on that, on what the plan is. It's usually to subsidize somewhere in the general fund in a department or so. So if I could get back to you on.
Sure, absolutely, no problem.
What the plan is, yeah.
Yep, that'd be great. Just curious as that, it doesn't make sense. And then just the last comment, and I believe you answered this, but by keeping our minimum fund balance a little bit higher than the 17% that's required, that is what helps propel us into that AAA bond rating?
Yeah, that's correct, Councilmember Rainville. Yes, that's one of the main things I think the rating agencies look at when assigning our bond rating is the amount of unrestricted balance, our ability to cover downturns or unexpected decreases or things like that. So that's kind of, that's one of the things we always watch.
And by having that higher bond rating, it actually lowers our cost to borrow.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, the interest rates are generally lower for AAA.
Thank you very much for your help.
Yeah, thanks.
Clerks, were you able to note Councilmember Rainville's second question?
Thank you. So if our expenditures in the parking fund are lower and the revenue is higher, how come there's less money going into the general fund?
Actually, let's welcome CFO Dye to perhaps shed some additional light. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Deshani Dye, CFO for the city. CBP and Councilmember Rainville, I'd be happy to answer that question. The reason why the reduction in transfer from the parking fund to the general fund, as well as the downtown assets fund, is due to the fact that the parking fund was not doing well for the last few years, and we did not want to go below their target levels. So we decided to reduce the planned transfer from the parking fund into downtown assets fund as well as the general fund to be able to give them some relief. In future budget years, we'll look at the current parking fund status and adjust the transfer as needed so they can keep their minimum target levels.
Thank you. That's very prudent, and it makes a lot of sense. So thank you. I don't need any follow-up on that question. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Are there any additional questions? Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Chowdhury.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to follow up on that minimum fund balance question. So the minimum requirement is 17%. When it comes to AAA bond rating, is it given if we are at the minimum amount, or is there a threshold that we're trying to reach that's at a higher percentage? Is it more of an art rather than a science in that case? Like, if we stayed at 17%, would we still get AAA bond rating because we had that factor in place? Or is there a higher threshold that we have in mind as a city to receive it?
What my belief is that it is one of the main factors that the bond, the rating houses consider, but not the only one. I mean, for example, if you had horrible liabilities or things like that, that could play a factor. I'd have to get back to you on a more like concrete answer, like exactly what the weightings are and things like that. For my colleague Alan Hoppy, but that's in general, yeah. There's more than one factor that goes into bond ratings.
Yes. Thank you. It looks like we have the CFO behind you.
Chair Chuktai, I would love to answer that question. The unrestricted fund balance is one of the criteria for our AAA bond rating. So our rating agency documentation is posted online, so you could kind of take a look at all of the criteria that they use and why we're given the AAA. They go into in-depth analysis and a write-up on why they're giving us the rating. And one of the other decision-making factors for us is how we're structured, how we make decisions on financial matters, our budgeting tools we use, and planned use of cash. Whether it's one time or for ongoing purposes, there are multiple reasons for our AAA bond rating, not just the restricted fund balance target.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from committee members? I'm not seeing any, so I will ask the clerk to file that presentation. Thank you very much. And with that, thank you all for your time. We have concluded all business to come before the committee today, and without objection, we stand adjourned until...
Madam Chair.
I apologize.
I'm sorry. It's actually not about this specific presentation. It's going back to a question earlier about the way you answered a question. Could we go back to, and I know we've already taken this vote, but to the discussion item 2.1 about approving the increase of 4%. We actually denied the increase for salary questions. I heard you, Madam Chair, answer a colleague's question about what would happen to this money if we didn't approve this salary increase. And I believe you said it would fall to the bottom line, right? And I think that's responsible, and we can deliberate about that on this dais, so long as it actually then gets removed from the budget, as we were talking about, right? So I'm just curious, I mean, keeping in mind that inflation is what we were adjusting for there, keeping in mind that the majority of the people that this affects are women and BIPOC employees, and it's hard to recruit and retain. I just wanted to make sure, is this money that was just then cut from this budget already earmarked for a budget amendment, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, that is, it is one of the sources being used potentially that
So
we will
it's not-
consider on Friday.
It's not actually going to be removed from the budget. It's rather just going to be reappropriated to something in a budget amendment that I haven't yet seen.
Yeah, and that's up to the committee's consideration when we get to markup starting on Friday.
Right, but the rationale used to cut this was about budgets being tight and having to look very carefully across the city and make responsible decisions. And what I didn't have in front of me when I took that vote is that there's actually some other, initiative afloat that some of us on this council have information in a budget amendment for, and others like me do not and have not been shared. So first, I do object to not having all the information when we make that decision. But secondly, my question is, when will we be getting the budget amendments that we'll be working on Friday? My original understanding from how this budget was outlined to me ages ago and that people were checking in with my staff on is that this would all be made public several days ago, and I still don't have any information in front of me.
Yes, so Councilmember, as I shared with the body over email last week, we had an influx of a pretty significant amount of budget amendments that were submitted by council members for inclusion in the markup packet. And we are, and by we, I mean the city attorney's office, the budget staff and the finance department, the city clerk's office are working as quickly as we can to finalize the markup packet. And when I contacted the body last week, or 2 Fridays ago now, right after amendments were due, I mentioned that in order to plan for unforeseen delays, as we had already seen with the amount of time it was taking us to get through amendments, that we would plan to distribute the markup packet as quickly as we could today. That will be happening later today, and posting it for the public on in the LIMS file sometime tomorrow.
So that's true. I just want to say, Madam Chair, that's true. You did change the process at the 11th hour after all the budget amendments were supposed to be due. You did change when we would be receiving our packet of amendments. The only person who I have full understanding of all of their amendments is Councilmember Wansley. It's relevant. I was just asked if it was relevant. It's relevant because this meeting, we voted on.
Out of order.
Colleagues,
We
please,
voted on.
Councilmember Palmisano is recognized to speak. Please, let's not speak over her.
Thank you. We voted on an item on this agenda today, and some of us had information that this will be used as a source for a budget amendment on Friday or on Monday, and others of us didn't have that information. So I'm just calling that out as something that existed today. That 9 of us, I think, 9 of us made a decision on removing an increase to salary and wage schedules to account for inflation for a group of our employees here at the city to be used for a future budget amendment, like earmarked for a future budget amendment. But and I'm guessing that some of my other colleagues don't have that information as to what that is meant or intended to be used for. And I just wanted to make that point and clarification because I did vote against it, but I respect the opinion or the consensus of the body. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Ellison.
I'll just say I don't even know what we're discussing fully, but it didn't factor into the decision of my vote. And I just wanted to let my colleague know that. But we do have positions. I think that we heard the range was anywhere from 390,000 to 90,000. And I was going to say this during discussion, but felt like we could move on. But I feel like this body would be happy to entertain any number of proposals, right? So maybe a 4% increase for folks making 120 or less. I'm just sort of spitballing here. But I think that was, to me, the idea that we could save $1 million, and the question of, does somebody who's making 390 or even 90 or 150 or 200 or 250, do they need a 4% increase? That was sort of the question, in my opinion, that was before the body, and that was the question that I was answering with my vote, not any other future question with anything in the future. So I just wanted to make that clear, and I don't fully know everything that we're discussing here, but I guess I'm excited to get fully in the know and see. But that was just to answer that question. That's the question I was trying to answer with my vote.
I would add some additional context here that, one of the items that we approved today, item number 2, the Deputy Commissioner of Community Safety position, there are actually a couple of different proposals that will be included in the markup packet. One of them is a mayoral amendment on funding for this position in the 2025 budget using a couple of specific civilian positions, and then additional proposals that use those sources for a different purpose. All of that is going to be taken up on Friday morning, and with that, I am going to adjourn this meeting until December 6th, Friday, December 6th at 10 a.m., where we will begin markup. Thank you all.